So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our debate on the European Union referendum, and it's good to see so many of you here this evening. My name is Julian Critchlow, and as you can see, I'm your chairman for the evening. And we're very lucky to have a panel of 4 distinguished speakers, all of whom are prominent in the referendum debate and incredibly knowledgeable about the issues. However, and I think this is very important for the debate, they come from diverse parts of the political spectrum. We have Independent, Social Democrat, UKIP, Labour and Conservative. So let me introduce them. The Right Honourable the Lord Owen is a doctor by training. He served in Labour governments as Navy Minister, Health Minister and Foreign Secretary, and of course was founder of the Social Democratic Party, which he led from 1983 to 1990. From 1992 to 1995, he served as EU peace negotiator in the former Yugoslavia. He's currently on the advisory board of the OMFIF, where he is regularly involved in meetings regarding the financial and monetary system, and he sits in the House of Lords as an independent Social Democrat. Lord Owen.
Thank you for a pleasure to be here. I've had a few stormy meetings in this particular hall. Where did it all go wrong? I think that's really the question we have to ask ourselves as we look at the choice on the 23rd. And I think it is very clear. People joined the EU after a good deal of controversy. It split the Labour Party for all through the late 60s, early 70s. And we had a referendum. If you think back to that referendum, those of you who can remember it, the present one is as different as chalk from cheese. It was a broadly open debate, conducted pretty fairly. Tony Benn argued on television directly with Roy Jenkins on the pro and anti side. We were promised that by Ted Heath and Roy Jenkins that monetary union was a thing of the past, and people voted overwhelmingly to stay. And I think, broadly speaking, most people in this country accepted that choice for at least the next 15 years. It all started to go wrong, in my view, when they introduced the single currency, the euro. Let's be very clear about this. The day you decide you're going to go for a single currency is the day you take one of the most fundamental moves towards the United States of Europe. There has never been a single currency which starts with a multiple number of countries that lasts unless those countries merge into one. That is the historic course, and people know it and understand why. This single currency had a very strange birth. It was opposed by the Bundesbank in Germany, which was the strongest economy at the stage, and it's opposed all the way through the negotiations, and they predicted that it would fail. It was pushed through by Chancellor Kohl after the really magnificent achievement of German reunification, because he knew that President Mitterrand, at that time the head of France, was worried with a great deal of French people that this was going to accumulate much too much power to Germany, which became overnight the largest country in the European Union. And so he offered, when Mitterrand raised it, to pool the strong Deutschmark with the franc and the other currencies and create this union. From then on, we were on an experiment. Don't let anybody be under any illusion. That's what it was. For the first few years, when coins and the notes came into existence in 2002, it began to look perhaps if it might succeed. There were those who had always predicted it would fail. As a strong European, I'd already decided, I must say in my heart, that it would fail. And I helped create an organization of pro-Europeans who were determined that we would not join the euro. Then when the global economic crisis came, the Eurozone was hit. Inevitably, But what was then very soon apparent is the Eurozone had its own particular crisis, quite distinct from the rest of the economies of the world. And it has been in a euro crisis for the last 6 years. At every stage, the American Treasury Secretary and the British Chancellor, give him credit, George Osborne, urged the Eurozone countries to change the fundamental structural flaws. And they have done practically nothing. The main and essential structural flaw is they have no way of compensating poorer Eurozone countries or poorer parts of a large Eurozone country with a fiscal transfer, which is the essential thing for any currency. Take away the jargon, fiscal transfer. It simply means what you in London know perfectly well. You're the most prosperous part of the United Kingdom, and for centuries, not just decades, you have found money going out from London up to Scotland, to Wales, to the northeast, and to the southwest where I'm on. And that has meant that we have alleviated some of the, if you like, effects of global economy on the whole of the UK. It has been a more even society. It's been a more settled society. There has been basically some measure of sharing of the nation's wealth. And that keeps us together, and that keeps our currency viable, and it keeps our self-governing democracy strong as well. And it is the essential element if you're going to run a currency effectively. In Eurozone terms, that means that Germany and Holland, the Dutch, the strongest two economies, but others as well, have to be prepared for their people to accept movement of money to other poorer countries, mainly the Mediterranean countries. And they are not, and they never have been, and at the moment you have to admit they never will be. This Eurozone crisis, the former governor of the Bank of England has already made absolutely clear. It's a good book, incidentally, Mervyn King's book. Has the magic of alchemy in the title, which explains the mess we're in the global economy. But he makes a very simple case on this whole issue. He's not arguing yes or no to going in, and nor is it a biography. It's an interesting insights book. And he says very simple things. The euro crisis will go on. There will be a euro collapse unless they take the changes to introduce fiscal transfers and other structural changes in the euro so that it will be able to succeed. And without it, he and most of us have no real knowledge what will happen. Maybe they struggle on for years in this present sort of semi-stagnation position, unable to move, unable to get agreement. Maybe emerging is a smaller Eurozone, nowhere near as large as the current 19 countries, and therefore very difficult to handle, with some countries being left out, some countries going in. We've already seen the problems with Greece, temporarily staved off for a few more months, perhaps a couple of years. Lucky if we do. And then you look at the big economy, the one that really you have to worry about, and that's the Italian economy. Look at every single parameter of the Italian economy. And if the Italian economy collapses, the impact will be very considerable. Ah, they say, but we're opted out. We won't be affected. Forget that one. If you're in the European Union, you will be affected by a collapse. Then the other argument that comes to me from even friends, I have to admit, and they said, David, don't worry about it. We all agree the Eurozone is going to collapse. We just don't want to be blamed for it. Blame, I say? What on earth do you mean? You mean to say we just sit there and accept it? That's exactly what the Americans want us to do. That's exactly what most other countries and international organizations and large companies, which depend on the sort of comfortable structures in and around the Eurozone. Our responsibility is when you see a wholly dysfunctional EU unable to make the changes that are vitally necessary in the Eurozone to anticipate collapse and get out before it happens. And it is very much, to my mind, as simple an issue as that. Yes, the getting out may be difficult, but the horizons it opens up are huge. And you already heard a good explanation of what the world economy out there looks like. And it is perfectly possible for us. We've done it for the last 10 years. We've dropped our exports to the EU from 55% to 45%, and we put them out into the global world. That means we can continue on that track, and if we're outside the European Union, we can do it much easier. So this is the choice. You look at this Eurozone and you see what's there, a dysfunctional EU. You are given an opportunity in the treaties to legitimately come out. There is a transition period of a minimum of 2 years in which, if you adjust yourselves and handle it properly, I believe most of the structural changes can be made. Or you throw up your hands in horror at the whole thing and are afraid of making the change. And I must say, if you are afraid of it, I don't blame you. They've not only just thrown everything possible at us, they've thrown the kitchen sink as well. This has not been a fair-minded, level playing field argument about the case. You know, no argument is ever won 100 to nothing. Most arguments, if we're honest, are usually, you've done well. If it's 60 to 40, it might be even less than that. And of course, you rightly say, there is a case out there for staying and trying to think you can change it. But every time you hear that argument, ask yourself, how much change have we really made? And when did this whole argument become really much clearer? I believe when the Prime Minister came back from his so-called renegotiation with very little. Now, I tell you quite bluntly, Harold Wilson did much the same. I mean, in 1975, before the referendum, I'm not going to tell you as a member of his then government that what we came back with was a tremendous amount, but it didn't really matter. Basically, the issue at that time was to get the Labour Party to rally round and support staying. That was the basic thing, because the Labour Party was split. This time, you would have thought the Prime Minister, sensing the divisions inside the party, would have stuck at it to get something really substantive back. He has got very, very little back, but he has conceded some very important things. No longer have we got, if this document lodged with the UN was to come into operation, which it will if we vote to stay and to remain, no longer have we got, will we use any of our veto powers on changes in monetary union. And he committed himself on a word of deep significance, deepening in the European Union, which he said they would not block, they would even facilitate, means ever greater union in all the things that matter. And I would just finally end on this. This dysfunctionality is not just confined to the Eurozone. We're meant to have now an EU foreign policy. Well, they had a go at coming forward with an agreement with the Ukraine, which I believe was deeply damaging. No explanations can be satisfactory from Russia for what they did either to Crimea or to East Ukraine. But to enter into a diplomatic dialogue and end up with a mess that came out shows you that we are becoming dysfunctional on foreign policy. And the other area where we are becoming dysfunctional is now with this German document, which will not be seen until after the referendum, on a military secretariat. There is one thing every single American defense secretary and president up until Obama have asked of us: do not, under any circumstances, create two military decision points in Europe. Keep one, NATO. We are now opening up the whole issue of European defense. Basically, it's fraudulent. You use the same people in the rapid reaction forces, which are labeled EU or in NATO. But it is, in my view, deeply, deeply damaging distraction and basically a justification for not having a serious defense policy. So I ask you, when you cast your vote, to be brave, to be strong, and take a decision which looks at the future of Britain over a decade, 2 decades, and 3 decades. Do not be diverted by changes which might be difficult, but which we can manage over the next 2 to 3 years. Have your confidence back in this country. Restore the strength of a united kingdom with a true commitment to democracy, and let's make our own decisions, live with them, and remain a united, vibrant, adventurous, energetic country.